Hello everyone, I am Vidya Lakshmi and I welcome you all to JavaScript tutorial by EduMoon. This course is just for you if you're someone who is passionate about being a web developer or you're interested in web development. So all you need to know in order to become a web developer is you need to have some basic knowledge on things like HTML and CSS, and you should get yourself comfortable building web pages, static web pages more precisely. So when I say static web pages, I mean the pages that you build out of HTML and CSS are known as the static web pages. So like I said, once you get comfortable yourself building static web pages, now you should make your website interactive. And for that, you need to learn JavaScript. So I'm here just to help you with that process. In this JavaScript tutorial, I'll be teaching JavaScript right from the beginning where you learn the basic things in JavaScript, and I'll take you to a point where you feel comfortable with JavaScript so that you can eventually learn the other frameworks out there in the market. So I once again welcome you all to this JavaScript introduction class. So in today's class, we're going to see what JavaScript actually is, and we'll also see why you need to learn JavaScript. Or I'm going to answer your question, why only JavaScript? So let's get started. Okay, what is JavaScript? JavaScript is a client-side scripting language that allows you to add dynamic behavior to your web pages. Okay, it is an interpreted programming language with object-oriented capabilities. So in this particular slide, we have three important terms that needs our attention. First is an interpreted programming language. We will see what interpreted programming language means. And the second one is client-side scripting language, right? So in order to understand what client-side scripting language mean, we should know what scripting languages are. So let's look at what they are. Scripting language. A scripting language is a programming language that is interpreted. Okay, I'm going to tell what interpreted mean. I suppose you know how a C program is executed. In C, you write some bit of code that performs some operation, and let us suppose it to be a sum of two numbers. Now you write this piece of code that performs addition of two numbers. In order to execute this particular code, this code is given to a compiler, which is a translator that converts your C program, which is English language, to a language that is understood by the computer, which is basically the machine code, which is a combination of zeros and ones, right? So this process of converting the source code to a machine code with the help of a translator like compiler is known as compilation, and all this is done before the runtime. So before the runtime, the code is compiled and it is placed ready for the execution. And the programming languages that are compiled are normal programming languages. So in case of an interpreted, it is also a translator, but interpreter skips this compilation part. What I mean is, you have this code in interpreted programming language. Now, during the runtime, the interpreter reads each line and it converts this particular line into a stream of commands, and they are executed directly during the runtime, unlike the compiler, which translates all of them into a machine code before the runtime. So an interpreter, everything is done during the runtime. It checks each line, it converts them into the commands, and it executes directly on the run system. So this is the distinguishing factor between a compiler and an interpreter. So the languages that are interpreted are known as the interpreted programming languages or a scripting language. And the normal programming languages that are compiled are programming languages. I think I'm clear. So let's take an example. Like we have programming languages like C, C++, Java, Python, Ruby, JavaScript, and PHP, right? So out of these, Java, C++, and C are compiled. So these are the normal programming languages. Whereas JavaScript, PHP, Python, Ruby are interpreted. So these 5 languages are the scripting languages. I think I'm clear with what scripting languages are. So let's look at this line. It will make this even more clear. While all scripting languages are programming languages, not all programming languages are scripting languages. What does this mean? All programming languages are not scripting language, whereas Every scripting language is a programming language. Like I said, JavaScript, PHP, and Python are programming languages, right? But Java, C++, and C are not scripting languages. So this is what that particular line means. So now that we know what scripting languages are, let's look at the two different kinds of scripting languages that are available. The first one is client-side scripting language and the other one is server-side scripting language. So for understanding these, you should understand how a web works. So web follows a client-server architecture which involves two systems, one called a client and other one server. Okay, client is nothing but it is you using your browser. You're requesting some information from the internet. Okay, this is internet. So you're requesting something through the internet. The request is sent to the server, which is actually a system residing at some remote location, which has the information that you have requested. So on receiving your request, the server sends back the response to the client through the internet, of course. So this is how web works. You send something, you request something from the internet. Internet forwards your request to this destined server and server sends back the response to the requested information. Right. So now that we know how it works, let's look at the server-side scripting and client-side scripting. Basically, in client-side scripting, you develop the web pages using either HTML, CSS, JavaScript, or VB script and Ajax. So let's suppose it's JS. So you have developed a web page using HTML, CSS, and JS. Now, with your web browser, you send some requests to the internet. Server receives that particular request. It does not do any sort of processing. It just sends back the response containing the HTML, CSS, and JavaScript to your browser. Now, it is the responsibility of the client system, which means your browser, to decide on how to show that particular response that is sent back from the client server. So this decides how JavaScript should work. Like when you click something, what should pop up, like what should happen in response to any particular event, or how a CSS should be appeared, how HTML should work. So it depends upon the browser. For example, if you have older versions of Internet Explorer, some of the CSS might not work, and even some of the JS functions or features does not work. But in case if you are working with a Chrome browser, then it works fine. So this is all about client-side scripting language, where the entire processing is carried out on the client side itself, and the server is relieved from the load of doing all of these things. So a best example would be Wikipedia. Like if I'm searching something on Wikipedia and you're also searching the same thing on Wikipedia, the response that we are gonna get is same. Like it is not personalized, it is not customized. We are going to get the same response. But in case of some other things, we get customized response. That is where we use server-side scripting. So yeah, in server-side scripting, the client will be sending some request to the server, and the server does the processing instead of sending back the normal results without processing. Here in server-side scripting, the server itself does the processing and it sends the customized or personalized response to the client in order to show the result. For example, you're using Instagram or Facebook. You request your Instagram page by entering your credentials, your username, and your password to the server. Now the server checks its database, and if that particular credentials match with the ones that are residing in that particular server, then it sends back the customized page. That means it just sends your Instagram page, and you were not allowed to access somebody else's Instagram page until unless you know their credentials. So this is mostly the personalized or a customized response that you're gonna get, because the entire processing is carried out on the server. It's even more dynamic, it's even more interactive, because it's checking the database and it is only giving the response if it matches. So these are the applications, or these are the things that we do in a server-side scripting. And mostly this is the difference. The basic difference between a client-side and server-side scripting is the processing that is carried out in different places. In client-side scripting, the processing is done in the client side, and in the server side, it is done in the server side. So yeah, and coming to JavaScript, it is a client-side scripting language. It is actually developed for client-side scripting language, but over time it has been evolved into other domains also. So now, at present, you can use JavaScript for server-side scripting also with the help of few frameworks that are very popular in present world. So I'm going to tell you about those frameworks in the next few minutes. So yeah, now JavaScript is basically a client-side scripting language that let you add some interactive behavior, dynamic behavior to your web pages. So now that we understood what JavaScript is, let's understand why you should be choosing JavaScript. So in order to answer this question, why JavaScript, I'm going to list few applications or domains or areas in which JavaScript has been evolved over years. So the first and foremost reason would be JavaScript is the most popular language in the world. Like you can Google the top 10 programming languages, and I'm sure you're going to get this in the list. So the time I've Googled, it is top second most popular programming language. So yeah, that is pretty much good reason to start learning JavaScript. And other reasons are like initially JavaScript was developed to be used in client-side scripting language only, but over the years it has been evolved and now it is used in various domains including web development, mobile application development, desktop applications, and it is even used in machine learning domain. So let's look at each of these domains and see how it is used. So coming to web development, like I said, it is not just confined to the client side scripting part. It has been evolved into the server side scripting also, which enable us to develop dynamic web pages that can interact to the servers and the databases and all of that. So the first framework is Node.js. It is a framework which is used for creating dynamic web pages. The underlying programming language is, of course, JS. So now, if you're comfortable with JS, you can happily learn Node.js and you can create dynamic web pages. So the second application is dynamic web pages. You can create dynamic web pages with React. So React is basically a front-end framework with which you can develop both web applications and mobile applications. And of course, the underlying programming language is JavaScript. So moving on, like mobile application domain, you can use, like apart from React, you can also use React Native, which is a framework for developing mobile applications like Android and iOS applications. So next application, like not just mobile and web applications, now with the help of JavaScript, you can actually develop softwares that can run on your desktop. No, I'm not talking about the web, I'm talking about the desktop applications. Like you can have a text editor, you have text editor in your laptop, right? So with the help of JavaScript and a framework called electron.js, you can actually develop desktop applications of softwares which are standalone softwares in your system. So all you need to know is build cross-platform desktops with JavaScript, HTML, and CSS. Now you need to know JavaScript, HTML, and CSS, and you're good to go with electron.js and develop desktop applications. So the other domain is machine learning. Now machine learning is everywhere. So we have something called TensorFlow.js, which is used for implementing machine learning algorithms using JavaScript. I think these are very good reasons that I think these are enough reasons for you to start learning JavaScript. So yeah, this is all about the first introduction to JavaScript. I'll be meeting you in the next lecture where we'll be starting with the basic concepts in JavaScript. Stay tuned. Thank you.